Hello and welcome back to my channel. So today some exclusive news about Chris Watts was released. So I thought I would make this video for my followers just to keep you guys updated. This chilling confession letter was sent to a lady who is writing a book called Letters from Christopher. In this letter, Chris Watts describes how he actually murdered his wife and his two children. Now, the confession in this letter is different than the confession that we have heard from Chris during the Watts case and after the Watts case when the detectives went to talk to Chris. Just to get some answers. So this letter has just come as such a shock to me, and I was wanting to share it with you guys. So it says, Chris Watts confessed he murdered daughters Bella 4 and Celeste 3 twice. Yes, how sick is that? He claims that he murdered his own daughters twice. Now, it says here, Watts, aged 34, described smothering his little girls in their beds with a pillow on August 13th, 2018, before going back to bed with his pregnant wife, Shanann Watts. But shockingly, his daughters woke back up, bruised and traumatized after he strangled Shanann to death in their bed in Frederick, Colorado. He then described driving back to the oil field where he methodically killed both of his daughters for the second and final time. The father admitted in his letter that he had been plotting the murders for some time so that he could be with his mistress, Nicole Kessinger. He also confessed that he slipped the potent painkiller oxycodone to his wife in hopes of inducing a miscarriage and making it easier to leave her. Wow, that is just disgusting. Okay, so let's get into the story now. The article. It said, family annihilator Chris Watts has made a chilling new confession that he murdered his daughters twice. In the letter, Watts writes, August 13th, morning of. I went to the girls' room first before Shanann and I had an argument. I went to Bella's room, then Cece's room. I used a pillow from their bed to kill them. That's why the cause of death was smothering. After I left Cece's room, then I climbed back into bed with Shanann. After Shanann had passed, Bella and Cece woke back up. I'm not sure how they woke back up, but they did. Bella's eyes were bruised, and both girls looked like they had been through trauma. That made the act that much worse, knowing I went to their rooms first and knowing I still took their lives at the location of the batteries, aka the oil tanks. Watts also admits to concealing other facts from authorities that he would not talk about on phone calls from prison to prevent them from being recorded. I don't like saying stuff like that over the phone because I'm never certain when they screen my calls, he wrote. He had previously claimed that it was a spontaneous outburst of rage that led him to kill his wife, who was 15 weeks pregnant with their son Nico, and their daughters, that he could be with his mistress of 2 months, his co-worker, Nicole Kessinger. However, he admitted in the letter that he had been plotting the murders for some time. August the 12th, when I finished putting the girls to bed, I walked away and said, that's the last time I'm going to be tucking my babies in. I knew what was going to happen the day before, and I did nothing to stop it, he wrote. He also confessed that he had slipped the potent painkiller oxycodone to his wife in hope of inducing a miscarriage. I thought it would be easier to be with Nicole if Shanann wasn't pregnant, he wrote. Watts took a plea deal to avoid the death penalty after pleading guilty to the 4 murders. He will spend the rest of his life in prison. Chris Watts described how he killed his wife in grisly detail and recalls how she looked moments before her death as he told her he wanted a separation and no longer loved her. Isn't it weird how I look back and what I remember so much is her face getting all black with streak marks of mascara, Watts said. All of the weeks of me thinking about killing her, and now I was faced with it. When she started to get drowsy, I somehow knew how to squeeze the jugular veins until it cut off the blood flow to her brain, and she passed out. I knew if I took my hands off her, she would still keep me from Nikki. They asked me why she couldn't fight back. It's because she couldn't fight back. Her eyes filled with blood as she looked at me, and she died. I knew she was gone when she relieved herself. Watts said that, to his surprise, his daughters came walking into the room while he was wrapping Shanann in a bedsheet and began asking what's wrong with their mum. He told them she wasn't feeling well. Watts said that he tried to carry Shanann's body downstairs, but she was too heavy and he lost his grip. He ended up dragging her down the steps and then bundled her into the back of his truck. The girls were just kind of running around the house and watching me with scared looks on their faces. Bella started to cry, and when she did, Celeste started whimpering. What a nightmare this was. He later said, I realize now the girls getting up and walking around may have been God's third attempt to stop what I was doing. He said that his overwhelming feeling was being so mad they were still alive. He then drove with his wife's body, her face and feet wrapped in garbage bags, and his 2 daughters to a remote oil field owned by his then employer, Anadarko. He had packed his lunch, a shovel, and rake, along with a gas can, which led the FBI to ask whether he was considering suicide. The FBI asked me if I was going to take my own life, and I told them I thought about it, but honestly, no. I was not going to take my own life. He recalled that it took him an hour to drive to the site, where he methodically killed both of his daughters. I dumped Shanann on the ground. Then I walked back to the truck, and with the blanket that Celeste was holding, I put it over her head and smothered her. Watts squeezed Celeste's body through an 8-inch hatch in one of the oil tanks. I couldn't believe how easy it was to just drop her through the hole and let her go. I heard the splash as she hit the oil. He then went on to talk about how he killed his eldest daughter, Bella, after she had watched him murder and dispose of her sister. He spoke of his surprise that little quiet Bella had a will to live. Out of all 3, Bella is the only one that put up a fight. I will hear her soft little voice for the rest of my life saying, Daddy, no. She knew what I was going to do to her. She may not have understood death, but she knew I was going to kill her. He had repeatedly told investigators that his daughters were not alive when they went into the tanks, and he had intentionally separated their bodies. I had to put the girls into the tanks so they wouldn't get up the second time, he said. He then turned to the task of burying his wife in a shallow grave. When I dug the hole, it seemed a lot deeper than it was. As I pulled on the sheet, she rolled out and into the hole. I think she had given birth. She landed face down, and I remember being so angry with her that I was not going to change how she landed, he said. The report also noted that Bella and Celeste had crude oil in their throats, stomach, and lungs after spending days in bottoms of the tanks. The author of the book asked Watts about the claims that he had given his wife oxycodone, and he responded with conflicting stories, saying he had given it to her twice, once at her parents' home in North Carolina to try and cause a miscarriage, and then immediately before her death. He later contradicted himself and said he only gave it to her once in North Carolina. I asked him where he got the oxy, and he told me that is the one thing he will take to his death. OMG. OMG. That is like red flag. A few hours after he buried his wife, Watts' alibi began to fall apart. He gave an awkward TV interview appealing for his wife and daughter's safe return.